Hey guys, we're going to do day 2 of the read aloud of Hachiko Waits. We'd left off on, we'd finished chapter 2, and like I said, I was going to do 2 chapters a day, and so we're getting ready to start chapter 3. But before we do, I'm going to show you, I have not uploaded these yet to Google Classroom, but I'm going to. There's just a few little activities that involve like some vocabulary words. There's like a dictionary detective. I'll upload that. Vocabulary study. This helps you work with the vocabulary words that go along with this novel. This is kind of an understanding of the story just for chapters 1 and 2. So like I said, I'm only going to put them up as we go along. And this is just a chapter summary of basically chapters 1 and 2. And this is the way that I'm going to upload these onto Google Classroom, though, to be honest. Instead of just like scanning them and putting them in, first of all, I can't really do that right now anyway, but I'm just going to take the way that they are and just type them out in a form, and you can use them that way. So what we're going to do, though, is we are going to continue, and where we had left off, for those of you that were watching and aren't quite sure where we left off was when the professor and Hachi followed the professor to the station, to the train station. The professor had to go to work. And the train the station master, agreed to keep Hachi for the day while the professor went to work. But at the very end of chapter 2, Hachi ran off. And that's where we left off. Okay. Professor Ueno packed up his books and left his classroom in a hurry. He was so distracted by thoughts of Hachi, he almost collided with a delivery boy on a bicycle who was balancing a round tray stacked high with lunch boxes and rice bowls above his shoulder. "Excuse me," the professor lowered his head in apology as the delivery boy swerved out of his way. Hoping Hachi had not caused the station master any trouble, the professor hurried along to board the train that would take him from the university back to Shibuya Station. Mr. Yoshikawa looked up at the big round clock hanging from the ceiling in the center of the train station. It was almost 3 o'clock. Soon Professor Ueno would arrive, and the station master would have to tell him what had happened. The professor had trusted him to take care of his dog, and he had not done his job. All day long he had asked people waiting for their trains if they had seen Hachi. "He is a young golden brown Akita-kun with a white patch of fur on his face," the station master said over and over. Every hour or so, Mr. Yoshikawa went down to ask the food vendors if they had noticed Hachi sniffing around their booths in search of a snack. He bought a bowl of udon from a vendor, quickly gobbled down the wide noodles, and then spent the better part of his noontime break searching the neighborhood for Hachi, but he had not been able to find him. At 5 minutes before 3 o'clock, Mr. Yoshikawa walked out into the platform and pulled at the tip of his red-brimmed hat. He looked to his right, the direction from which the train would arrive. There was no sign of it yet. Mr. Yoshikawa turned and looked to his left. He blinked once, then shook his head and blinked again because he could not believe what he saw, a golden brown Akita-kun. The station master rushed over to the dog. "Hachi," he asked. The dog thumped his tail once at the sound of his name. "Where have you been?" Mr. Yoshikawa asked, rubbing the dog's neck and shoulders. "I have been worried about you." Hachi stared into his eyes, mute. "Well, never mind," Mr. Yoshikawa said, giving Hachi a pat on the head. "I am very happy that you are here." And just as the words left his mouth, the train entered the station and ground to a halt. Professor Ueno was the first one to step off. "Hello, little friend," he called, his voice full of happiness. Hachi ran to his master, licked each of his fingers, and then spun in circles before him. Yasuo and his mother followed the professor off the train. "Look, Oki-san," Yusawa laughed. "The professor's dog is making himself dizzy." "He is dizzy with joy," said Mrs. Takahashi with a smile. When Hachi stopped spinning, Yasuo called, "Here, Hachi," and held out his hand. The dog looked at the boy and wagged his tail, but he stayed at the side of his master. "Thank you so much for watching him," the professor said to the station master. "It was very kind of you to do me the favor." "You are very welcome," said Mr. Yoshikawa. "Was Hachi any trouble?" Professor Ueno asked. Mr. Yoshikawa looked at the dog and lifted his eyes. Hachi looked back at him with his mouth slightly open and his pink tongue hanging out almost as though they were laughing. And here's the illustration. Look at Hachi. Oh, I just love these illustrations. They're so detailed. They're beautiful. "I do not know if he was trouble," the station master said. "Hachi left the station a few minutes after your train pulled away from the platform. I tried to catch him, but he ran too fast. I asked many people and searched for him during my lunch hour, but I could not find him. And then out of nowhere," Mr. Yoshikawa gestured towards the train station's entrance, "he returned just before 3 o'clock. It is as though he knew when you would arrive." The professor looked down at Hachi and beamed. Dogs could not tell time, or could they? "That is most interesting," he said to the station master. "I am sorry he caused you so much trouble." "There is no need to apologize," said Mr. Yoshikawa, "because the story has a happy ending." "I thank you again," said the professor, bowing his head. Then he turned to Hachi. "I always knew you were smart," he said. Now I know you are even smarter than I thought. Little friend, you are the smartest dog in all of Japan." Chapter 4. From that day on, Hachi walked to the train station with Professor Ueno every morning and met his train every afternoon. The professor knew that Hachi ran home after his train left the station because his housekeeper told him so. Hachi kept himself very busy while the professor was at work. He cleaned his paws and chased his tail. He sniffed the wind and chewed on sticks. He often took long naps in the sun under the cherry tree in the yard, but he always woke up in time to return to the station to meet his master's train. The station master checked the time as soon as Hachi arrived. 5 minutes to 3, he would announce, looking at the big clock hanging from the station ceiling. "Hachi, you are always right on time. I could set that clock by you." A year passed and the professor's routine did not change. He and Hachi walked to the train station in the spring when the cherry blossoms bloomed, and in the summer when the rains came. They walked to the train station in the autumn when the leaves changed color, and in the winter when the snow fell. The professor was always the last one to step onto the train before it left in the morning, and he was always the first one to step off the train after it arrived in the afternoon, and Hachi was always there to meet him. He was never a minute early and never a minute late, and as soon as he saw his professor, he always ran to his master, licked his fingers, and spun in joyful circles before him. One morning in early May, as the professor and Hachi were taking their morning walk to the train station, Professor Ueno stopped to admire the many-colored fish-shaped banners hanging from bamboo poles outside the house as they passed. "Hachi, sit! Look, little friend," the professor said, pointing. "Those flags look like a type of fish called carp, and they have been hung in the honor of Tango no Seku, a special holiday that celebrates all the boys of Japan." Hachi's eyes followed his master's finger toward the waving banners. A much more detailed, large illustration, double page there. There's the master and Hachi, and you can see the banners. You can see he said like in the shape of carp. You can see all the different details. So pretty. "It is traditional to hang a special carp flag for each boy in the family," the professor told Hachi. "When I was young, a big red and white carp flag that looked exactly like that one flew for me." He gestured towards an especially large banner rippling in the wind. "The carp is very strong and very brave, little friend. He must swim upstream against the current, and that takes great determination and perseverance. But once he does so, he knows he can overcome all of his life's obstacles and difficulties. Every boy, including you, Hachi, might strive to be as strong and brave as the carp." Hachi sat completely still with his ears thrust forward, listening carefully to the professor, as he always did when receiving such lessons from his master. "Come, Hachi, it is time to catch my train. Heel." The professor started off again, and Hachi fell into step beside him. It was a mild spring day, yet by the time Professor Ueno and Hachi walked up the steps to the train station, the professor's face was covered with sweat. He removed his glasses and wiped his forehead with a clean white handkerchief. "Good morning, Professor," the station master greeted Professor Ueno with a bow. "Hello, Hachi." "Good morning, Mr. Yoshikawa." The professor lifted his handkerchief and wiped his brow again. "Are you not feeling well?" the station master asked, his voice full of concern. "Would you like a glass of water?" "No, thank you. That is very kind of you, but I am fine," the professor said, putting his handkerchief into his pocket. He showed the ticket taker his pass and walked through the doorway. "Hachi!" Yasuo called. The professor and Hachi crossed over to the platform. "Happy Boys' Day, Yasuo," said the professor. "Thank you," said Yasuo. He ran his hands up and down the fur around Hachi's neck. "He has gotten so big. He stands almost 2 feet high now and weighs 100 pounds. That is good size for a male Akita," said the professor, who never let an opportunity to teach go by. "Feel his coat here," he guided Yasuo's hands to Hachi's chest. "This fur is his undercoat. It is thicker and softer than the rest of his fur. Once the undercoat has come in, the Akita-kun is full grown." "I am still growing," said Yasuo. "I am going to be very tall." "Taller than I am," teased the professor, who was not tall at all. "I hope so," said Yasuo, standing on his toes. "Yasuo," said his mother in a scolding voice. "The professor is a man of respect. Do not be rude to him." But Professor Ueno only laughed. "I am sure you will rise to great heights," he said to the boy. The 9 o'clock train arrived right on schedule. As everyone clambered onto it, Professor Ueno leaned down to say goodbye to Hachi. "What a good dog you are." He repeated the same words every day. "What a fine dog you are, Hachi. You are the best dog in all of Japan." He patted Hachi's head and kissed the tip of his nose. I will return at 3 o'clock, he reminded Hachi. Farewell, little friend. The train pulled away and the professor waved as he always did. Hachi stayed right where he was, watching the train as usual. But then he did something he had never done before. As the train picked up speed, Hachi chased after it and let out a loud bark. 1-1, he called to Professor Ueno. And then again, 1-1, 1-1. The professor leaned out of the train with a worried look on his face. Was Hachi all right? But when he saw the dog standing on the platform and wagging his tail, he grinned and waved. Hachi, what a splendid voice you have, he called out proudly. What a good dog you are. Farewell, little friend. The station master walked over to Hachi and squatted down before him. What did you have to say to the professor today that was so important? He asked the Akitakin. But Hachi would not repeat himself. He merely turned and left for home. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, when the train pulled into Shibuya Station, Hachi sat in his usual spot by the tracks, his eyes focused on the first car's doors. It slid open and a woman in blue and white kimono with a tiny baby strapped to her back stepped out. A man carrying a newspaper folded. 2 young girls in matching blue skirts and white blouses with red kerchiefs tied around their necks came next. Where was the professor? Hachi sat still as a statue, waiting. Finally, Yasuo and his mother stepped onto the platform. Hachi, Yasuo called. The dog barely looked at him. Oka-san, where is the professor? He was not on the train. Perhaps he is in another car, Mrs. Takahashi said, her eyes searching the platform. I do not see him, she said. Hachi, your master must have missed the train. Do not worry, I am sure he will be on the next one. Do not worry, Hachi, Yasuo repeated, patting the dog on the head. Hachi sat up very tall and straight with his ears held erect, staring at the train tracks. When the next train arrived, he looked at each person who stepped out, but none of them was the professor. Other trains came and went, each one discharging many passengers. Some people hurried by Hachi, others stopped and ran their hands along the dog's soft fur. Hachi paid no attention to any of them. Hachi waited all afternoon and all evening as train after train pulled in and out of the station. Mr. Yoshikawa brought him water and tried to share a bowl of rice with him, but Hachi would not eat. Finally, it was midnight and the last train arrived at the station. Professor Ueno was not on it. Where can the professor be? The station master wondered out loud. He took off his hat and scratched the side of his head. This is not like him. He never misses his train. The station master put his hat back on and pulled the brim down low over his eyes. I am sorry, Hachi. I have to close the station now, and you must go home. Go! Mr. Yoshikawa pointed his white glove at the stairway. Hachi's eyes followed the station master's finger, but the rest of him did not move. I am sorry, Hachi, but you must go. Mr. Yoshikawa was kind yet firm as he forced Hachi through the station door toward the exit. Hachi did not want to leave, but he had no choice. The station was locked up tight behind him. That's the end of chapter 4. As you can see, we're on to chapter 5. This is a great story, but I know that I always get caught up in it, and there's some parts of it. Well, you'll see when we get to it. But once again, I'm going to be uploading these things onto Google Classroom, and I figured since you all never got to actually meet my new little squirrel, I thought I would go ahead and get her out so that you could meet her. And I'm not going to get Scrat. Scrat was out for several hours today, and he was running around and playing and just, being a squirrel. And he was doing great and everything. But like I said, he's at the age where you can love on him and hold him, but it's usually when it's his bedtime. And right now he's still playing downstairs. So if I tried to get him now, he wouldn't sit still for us. So, but if usually bedtime, first thing in the morning, and when when I get ready to put him to bed, he's very, very lovable. And maybe one of these times I'll be able to get him so I can show you what he's like. Because you all have not seen him since he was probably Delilah's age. So I got her right here. Let me get her. Oh, what a good girl. What are you doing, baby? What are you doing, baby girl? Come here. Come here. There's some people I want you to meet. Yeah. Oh, did I wake you up? Alright guys, here's little Delilah. Isn't she precious? Mrs. Ingram, I love the animals, guys. Look at that tail. Look at those eyes. Say hi, guys. Say hi. She is starting to eat a lot more. She mainly eats formula, but I did get her to try, oh, she's so cute. I did get her to try a little bit of raspberries. Scratch, that's one of his favorite treats is raspberries. And, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Huh? She is so precious, guys. I just wanted you to to meet her. Maybe, I don't know, like I said, maybe I can do Scrat another time, and maybe the puppies. Oh, puppies. It's trouble. I wouldn't be able to do them together. I wouldn't be able to get them to sit still. Now, Lucian is the one that pretty much listens to me, and he would probably sit still. But Toto, she's a handful in snow. He's wild, but you know, I pretty much have a zoo here. You know, I love the animals. But anyway, I wanted to introduce you to the little baby girl. Say hi. Hi, Mrs. Ingram's class. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to upload. Oh, there you go. I'm going to upload those onto Google Classroom. And it's okay, baby. And I am not going to be putting up a video tomorrow because, well, it's the weekend and it's Easter. And I hope you guys at least get to spend Easter with your families and you have a good time. And once again, praying that all of you are safe and healthy and everything's going good, and that I know it's hard to keep up with schoolwork. I get that. I totally get that, especially being off like this. But it's really important for you to try and stay on task. Try and do some reading. Do your math. Try and keep up with the assignments. I don't know if we're going to pick up this school year or not. I honestly have no idea. My prayer is that we do, because I want to be able to see you guys and spend some time with you before I pass you on to 4th grade. I can't believe I'm already saying that. But we're getting close to that point. So I pray that we do have a little bit of time together. But I'm going to continue to do this, and that's my way of communicating with you and trying to keep in touch with you. So I love you guys.